Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxiety Chicks podcast. I'm Allison Sepinera,
And I'm Taylor.
and we are so excited because we have a wonderful guest today. That's a topic I feel like I could personally talk about forever because it's one of my biggest struggles as I go through my healing journey. Um, I want to welcome Meredith Van Ness to the show. I'm so excited to have her on. Hello, hello.
Oh,
And just tell you a little bit about Meredith before we jump into this topic. So Meredith is based out of Colorado. She's a therapist for over 20 years, and she treats people in Colorado and Florida. She does some telehealth, which is awesome. So many people are looking for that these days. And she treats women with anxiety, but specializes in helping women to really learn how to love and trust themselves despite anxiety. So we're going to talk a little bit about confidence and how to kind of, I wouldn't say quiet that inner critic a little bit, and what you can do to really learn how to love yourself wholeheartedly through this whole process. So, welcome to the Anxiety Chicks, Meredith. I'd love for you to start and tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of the work that you do.
yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me. And it's a pleasure to meet you both. I've been a therapist dating myself here, but yes, for 20 years. I have niche down. I only work with women specifically with anxiety. A lot of women who are dealing with that kind of harsh inner critic and learning how to talk back and learning how to calm some of the anxiety that might be perpetuating the negative self-talk too. So it's been a great pivot for me to really to nail down my niche and really be able to work with women with this one issue. So I work with women one-to-one in therapy, coaching. I also provide workshops and now am just finally starting to write my book. So that's really exciting.
I love that. That's so awesome. So we kind of mentioned this inner critic word, right? Like quote unquote inner critic. And for anyone watching or listening who might not really know kind of what that means, can you just describe what the inner critic is and kind of how it develops and all of that?
Yeah, of course. And I would love for you both to share your thoughts. It sounds like you guys do that in your podcast too. That's so nice to have that dialogue. But as far as the inner critic goes, really it's that negative self-talk, that part of your psyche that doesn't think that you're living up to your potential or is able to do all the things that you have set for yourself as life goals. And so then it ends up holding you back. And oftentimes that's in the form of negative self talk, which can also show up as imposter syndrome. It can also show up as people pleasing. It can show up as people who try to be perfect all the time. We know perfectionism doesn't exist, but these are things I think as women that we tend to deal with on a daily basis to some degree, but really we want to be aware of these type of thinking patterns so that we can challenge them and dispute them and then start working towards whatever goal that we're trying to work towards.
Yeah, that's such a good description. I we were just kind of live. We go live every Wednesday on our Instagram page
Oh,
at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for anyone that wants to join. We always talk about kind of the topic at hand for that week and answer questions and give our personal experience. And I was actually telling a little bit of my story with my inner critic and how I think for me in this whole journey of healing my anxiety and trying to understand more about myself, that's the hardest part for me. You know, getting the tools in my toolkit to kind of really help regulate my nervous system. And, I practice yoga daily and I really have shifted the cognitive piece on how to feel safe in my body and, feel safe in situations that I usually would feel so scared about. I've done a lot of that work and I feel really confident, quote unquote, right, about me handling that part of it and the physical sensations I have. But the critic of my own just my not even it's just the way that I look, my age, the
mm,
path that I'm on with my anxiety, the things that I haven't worked that in my mind I'm thinking, oh my gosh, shouldn't I already have been okay by now in this. How many times of therapy have I gone? How many years, how old I am? I should be further along in my journey. And just so many things that still creep up. And I'm really trying hard to really shift and rewire and make it a different habit in my brain of being compassionate with myself. But it's hard. It's freaking hard. And I'm so curious, like, why do you think the inner critic has such a strong hold on our self perception and like what we think about ourselves?
I think it's a really hard habit to break. And I
Yeah.
think we learn, especially as children and in chaotic environments, which a lot of us were in. And, we learn this as a coping skill. And we try to help whomever is around us. And that comes from like the people pleasing and then the trying to kind of, be in the shadow. And I think that it's a habit and our brain gets used to that habit. And so over time, that might be the last habit to break. Like in your anxiety journey is finally saying, I don't need this habit anymore. And the habit of negative self-talk is hard. It's just truthfully hard to break. So I think that's why a lot of women and men too, of course, struggle with that inner dialogue. And, I think it's really helpful. The first step is just noticing that you're even having negative self-talk. Oftentimes people go throughout the day or their lives and they don't even realize that they're saying negative things about themselves or their experience in the world or what they should be doing or living up to. And so until we really get in touch with that, it's really going to be hard to say, I don't want to do that anymore.
It's interesting, Allison, hearing you. I know a couple times you've talked about like body image and stuff and struggling with that. And I feel like I was thinking more about it because I've heard two people that are kind of around your age talking about it. You're that generation where I don't know if your mom was like this or the people maybe you were around, the adults. It was like the like fad diet generation. I feel like the moms doing all the, and so kind of like what you said, Meredith, that's my brother's fiance's name.
Well, some people
Meredith.
so I thought you were saying that.
No, so kind of like you were saying, it's like at childhood, like what you saw, like the way you saw women speak about themselves for like probably a lot of your childhood. All the women you were looking up to were doing like the compulsive aerobics classes, the compulsive, like in your face fad diets, like low fat, all those things, diet pills. That I feel like is the 30s and 40s generation right now. So that's a lot of women. And I feel like I hear this more times than not, women who struggle with body image. Like it is so prevalent, I feel like, that it's an epidemic of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. I think that when we look in the mirror, we are so easy to judge what is wrong, and as you age, I mean, I'm a little bit older, as you age, like things are like falling down and there's wrinkles and there's part of life. And we're trying to scrutinize ourselves in such a harsh way that inner talk starts like right away in the morning if you happen to look at yourself in the mirror, which oftentimes people do. And so if it's just this constant dialogue all day that you're having, then it's going to be a hard habit to break, but possible.
Yes, yeah. And we're gonna get there eventually about what we can do to kind of reframe that part of our brain. And I'm curious because yes, Taylor, I think that there is something to say about that, and things that maybe we have, the messages we received. I received it when I was younger. I mean, we didn't have body positivity when I was a kid. Like, no. We didn't have any of that. I think about how amazing that is and what I would be like maybe if I knew that existed back then. And it might have been different.
Do you guys remember this movie? What was it? It was like they sent him to fat camp with Ben Stiller.
Oh my God! No, but that's really.
I remember watching this as a kid. Like it just popped in my head, and the movie's like looking back is so bad. Like thinking, I'm gonna actually find the title of it. But it's like that movie would never be created now. You know what I mean? Hang on,
Yeah.
The fact that we like even know about those type of camps, like that's what's
Yeah. And it was
Totally.
literally called Hang on, let me
yeah,
see.
I
Yeah.
think it was.
Heavyweights, a movie called Heavyweights,
Oh my God.
1995.
I don't
Yeah, I
think
was
I
gonna
saw
say
that.
Look it up. It is so
mid to
bad.
late 90s. Well, and yeah, and so even kind of just, I know everyone has different types of anxiety, but when it comes to those negative thoughts for me, yes, that's where it kind of, that's what it attaches to, is my body image. And also it's almost just about, the anxiety comes up for me too about being around, either whether it's dating or being in a social situation and I'm comparing myself to other people. And the thoughts just get so loud and so critical when that, I guess, also in this career too, not even just about my body, but the imposter syndrome. Like, oh my gosh, how am I, this person is so much better than me. This so much person is so much prettier than me, skinnier than me, has more money than me. I mean, and so I'm curious what you would say, if like how I would differentiate once I'm sort of aware of that I have these things, and I am very aware. I kind of can catch myself now, and sort of, I have to some extent trained myself to be more loving and give myself grace during those moments. But how would someone like differentiate between like a constructive self-reflection and a harmful self-criticism? Like what, how can someone be aware of the separation of the two?
Well, I think, like you said, we all have these reoccurring, if we're talking about these negative thoughts like habits. And so it's identifying, if they make you feel good or if they don't, right? If we have 70,000 thoughts in our brains per day, most of them are probably pretty decent, and a lot of them aren't even really important. Like, I'm drinking a glass of water, right? Like, I'm not like ruminating on that. But I think it's the negative ones that we have over and over and over, whether it's about body image or whether it's about advancement in your career or what you should be doing in your life. I think we can identify them once we notice we're having them over and over. And then how do we feel, about them? For me, I think like when I really noticed this come up for me was when I had young children. I was trying to start my private practice and I was trying to be like this like super mom. And I'm like, it took me a while to be like, wait, that doesn't exist. That's actually not a thing. But it took me a while. And I'm a therapist. I had already been a therapist for like, 10 years before that. So, and I think it's like, don't you guys think it's maybe different for everyone? Like what those thoughts are?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally say that. Yeah, and even just thinking about, with our clients, that come see us, it's their experience. Everyone's experiences are so different. So wherever their, thought pattern that comes in that's maladaptive or, critical, I think will look so different for everybody, right? Maybe the themes could be similar.
Yes, right. Those core beliefs that we get oftentimes when we are in dysfunctional, not always, but sometimes when we're in dysfunctional childhoods and we have maybe not the models that hopefully we're all trying to do now with our kids.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I was talking about in the live too, was about core beliefs and kind of just doing a short psychoeducation with the people watching about core beliefs and how these are, the reason why they're called core beliefs is because they really are established in our brain at a very, very young age. So it's kind of the way we see ourselves and we see the world. And they are core beliefs because we really genuinely think they're true. But then when we actually do the work to unravel the truth of someone who thinks, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, or I'm worthless, or what's another one? Like I'm a failure, right? Those are so many I see in my practice that they seem so real to that person. But then once you start unraveling and really taking practical steps to cognitively shift and challenge the thoughts behind those beliefs, you kind of start really chipping away and being like, you know what, maybe I don't believe that about myself. And so that's kind of like what I wanted to ask. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Taylor, but
No, I agree. I believe that everybody's journey might be different, but the core beliefs might be the same. And the thoughts can be the same, but like how they got there is maybe a little different. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's like the core beliefs that are like, yeah, I'm not enough, right? Or I can't get this right, or I think those are probably pretty common, unfortunately, core beliefs that stem from childhood or adolescence, and so yeah, getting in touch with the thoughts is the first step. Paying attention to what you're saying to yourself, what you're saying about yourself, what you're saying about the world that you live in. I think that's the first step.
Is there something you would suggest for someone who wants to get more clarity on that would be helpful?
I do daily check-ins. I think are really helpful. Oftentimes, like when a client comes in and they've never been in the therapy office before, I really like them to start journaling. I think journaling is a great way to get in touch with the thoughts that we're having. They're sometimes subconscious, like we don't even maybe know we're having these type of thinking patterns. But then also like check-ins with yourself, like how am I actually doing right now? Like what am I thinking about? Am I having a good day? Did I have a good day? How did I respond to stress? All these type of questions that like we would ask other people, like, hey, how are you doing? And we forget to ask ourselves. And then we just go throughout the day and then we're not learning and growing in the way that we might want to do. So I love the daily check-ins as a part of, I mean, not just the therapy experience, but just, being a human.
I love
what do you
that.
do if you start to notice a client? I feel like there's some people, and I've definitely been there before, where the daily check-ins, right? Every day is like, oh, it was a bad day, but it like wasn't a bad day, but you harp so much on that like one negative thing that happened that day, or that one, your recency bias is so set on it's negative, it's a bad day, when it really wasn't a bad day. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Like how you can, have you ever been journaling and like all your journal entries are like, up, today was a bad day. And you think back to it and you're like, wait, yesterday really wasn't that bad of a day. Why did I write that?
Right. That's a great question. I think maybe the 0 to 10 scale could help with that. Like how bad of a day was it really? Right? Like if the worst day possible is a 0 and the best day possible is 10, depending on how you do the scale, then is every day a 4, and maybe I think that's why therapy can be helpful, because in
Yeah.
a kind way, the therapists can kind of call people out on that a little bit. Oh, okay. Is
Yeah.
it every day a 4, or whatever that looks like. But I think it's just being self-aware and honest. It's really common to get stuck in those negative thinking patterns, and we all do it. But if we want to see our way out of them, we have to have that awareness that we're doing that.
Yeah. That self-awareness is so important.
Yeah.
I would also add that, if someone's stuck and there's just this pattern they see of if they do or journaling and it's just a pattern of negativity, I would become very clear on emotions and try and get very clear on how you're feeling. So I was talking about this on another podcast yesterday that I did about emotional awareness and how important it is to understand more about like how you're feeling and using feeling words. So if you're doing a brain dump and you're just kind of free associating, and I love doing this with clients too, where I'll just say, don't worry about grammar, punctuation, literally just write everything that's in your brain. Maybe whatever comes to your brain is like, this exercise is stupid. I don't know why I'm doing it. Like just write it out and just write out whatever, like the stream of consciousness going on. And this one thing can actually be helpful really with a therapist. This is something that, so you can see a different perspective, but becoming very clear on feeling words. So you have all of these thoughts that you wrote down, but now how are you feeling? What are the feelings connected to them, right? So maybe you have to print out a list of emotions, which you can get them anywhere in Google, and start getting really comfortable with the vocabulary of language, right? And emotions, and knowing that feeling expression is huge with awareness. So, okay, you had all of these thoughts. How are you feeling as you were thinking about this? Were you sad? Were you scared? Were you worried? Were you kind of excited, but also nervous? That's just more awareness. I don't know. What do you think?
That's so true.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's so true. Yeah, and I think that feeling vocabulary is key in therapy, but it doesn't have to be just in therapy. It can be, like you said, like literally Google feelings worksheet, and there'll be a million that come up. But I think, yeah, being in touch with what's happening for you will help with the process too, for sure. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit more about like the confidence piece, because I know you had mentioned that there's a lot in your practice about helping women build their confidence through self-love and through kindness. And I'd love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on how self-compassion kind of like directly impacts our confidence.
Yeah. And I think it's, goes along with the negative self-talk too, is the first step is identifying, okay, I'm having this negative self-talk, but then instead of, we have to be really careful here that we're not then beating ourselves up about having negative self-talk. So it's like, oh, there I go again. I'm having more negative self-talk. There's something wrong with me. Why am I having this self-talk? And so then, that awareness can actually kind of bite us in the butt, because we're like, oh, now I'm aware that I'm actually being mean to myself, right? I'd rather like not have that awareness and not realize I'm being mean to myself. And so I think the first step is noticing, and then the second step is that self-compassion or that self-kindness is, okay, I noticed I'm having a negative thinking pattern. I know that I'm probably doing this out of habit based on whatever preceded these negative thinkings, whether it was a trigger or, something that's habitually happening for someone every day. And then saying, okay, well, I noticed that, but it's okay. Like, I'm working on this, or I'm just aware that I'm having negative thoughts and there's an alternative thought that I could have instead. So really trying to do this process non-judgmentally it's key.
Oh my God, you just mentioned non-judgment, the word judgment. Like, I can't believe we haven't even said it yet in this whole episode, because that's essentially what the inner critic is. It's all self-judgment, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Right. I like that you said it's a habit, that it's almost like breaking a habit. Like when you've been negative to yourself for so long, you can't expect to one day just wake up and be like, I'm going to just be so positive to myself. Or I put affirmations on my mirror like they told me to, and I'm still thinking negative. And it's like, think about how long you've been negative to yourself. You can't, I always think about that with anxiety. It's like, how long have you had anxiety? People who like want to like wake up tomorrow and have no anxiety. It's like, you've had all these days of anxiety, and you just expect one day is just going to be this flip of a switch. It's like, you have to unlearn all these days of learning. You have to unlearn all these patterns, and that takes time. But like, it's nice hearing from practitioners like you who are like, it takes time, but it's possible. Like, you don't have to be stuck in these negative loops for like forever. Like, you can get through it. It might not feel like your first 2 weeks of being positive to yourself or having compassion with yourself is you might not feel anything, right? Like, your first 2 weeks of doing it, you might not feel any changes, but it's that habit building of unbuilding those negative habits.
Yeah. And it can start really small. Like, we don't, the opposite of what we want to do is tell our brain things that aren't believable, right? So if, we're talking about body image and don't like the way something looks, we can't just go to the opposite, right? And say, oh, I love the way that body part looks. Like, no, we have to say, no, that body part's okay. I'm working on it, or, I'm accepting it as it is, whatever. I'm going off on the body image. But, I think, that we have to really be aware of that we're saying the negative things. We've been saying them for a long time, but that we don't want to do it anymore. Like, it's making us anxious. It's making us feel bad. And it's getting in the way of us, like, as cheesy as it seems, like literally living the best lives that we can live. And so I think it starts with the awareness and then the non-judgmental. And yeah, I think it's huge. If everyone could learn how to do that, it would be a better world that we were living in.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Really.
This just came back to me as you were saying that was something that happened to me 2 days ago when I was at bar class. And I love my gym. I love going to bar. And I like standing in front of the mirror so I can see my form when I'm doing it. And for some reason, Tuesday morning or Monday morning, whatever, I could not stand looking at myself. Mm-hmm. Everyone around me was like a toothpick. They were wearing these cute little outfits, like matching Lululemon, whatever. And I'm like in my
the matching sets. Triggered by a matching set.
I'm literally just thinking about what was annoying me at that moment and making me feel even worse about myself. And
Betty
it was
in a matching set.
And all of the girls were like probably 19 years old. And I'm just there, sweating, gross. And I just remember looking in the mirror. And for the first 5 minutes of class, I was like, my brain, I'm not even kidding. You are so disgusting. You're so gross. How are these girls so skinny? You're so old. Like, you look at that roll in your stomach. You have to pull your shirt up a little bit so other people don't see that roll. This is honestly what was going through my brain. Mm-hmm. And just, why don't you have taken care of yourself so much of your life? Why can't you ever be skinny? Why haven't you ever looked like this before? So many people just can be skinny and it's so easy. Just like all this stuff for the first 5 minutes of class. And I literally, I guess this is something now you guys are kind of hearing me have a revelation live, because I was able to look at myself and I just didn't want to see myself, but I said, you know what? I looked at myself, and in the middle of all this, obviously to myself, not out loud, I thought, you are being so mean to yourself. You are beautiful. Like, look how amazing your body is that you can walk, and that you've figured out how to, nutritionally, your body's helping you absorb food better lately. And, your body is doing all these things for you. Why are you being so mean to it? I was literally having a conversation with myself. And yeah, I'm really proud of myself now that I think about that. I haven't even talked about this.
That's amazing.
And I really felt like, you know what, you are beautiful. Someone's going to love this body one day when I find a relationship, and everybody's body is so different. And honestly, as I started saying this to myself, I really looked around the room, and there was only like 2 girls that were like, for me, I was so hyper focused on like the girl behind me who was literally like a stick and whatever. But there was literally women of all ages and shapes and sizes all around me. And it's like, they're all beautiful women and all shapes and sizes. And there was something in that moment for me that just made me, and the whole rest of the class was amazing. And I honestly haven't even really thought about that since. But I think that's why that awareness is so important, because it's in the moment. Like, you could be listening to this podcast right now in the car or something and thinking, oh, such a good point. You know what? Yeah, I love myself. And maybe you're practicing it. But those hard moments, when the thoughts actually creep in that are critical, that's when the work actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. In the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And think about all those other women in the class who are probably thinking the same thing, which is what's so hard, like, I know. Oh, look at this woman. Like, she's awesome. She's been coming here for how long? And she's my inspiration. Like, it's just, we're so mean to ourselves and hopefully kind to other people, but we just need a little bit of that like kindness that we give to other people and put it back on ourselves. And I think that's why that self-compassion movement is so important. And I love all of Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. So I usually bring that into my sessions too. Just having kindness for yourself, right? Like, notice how you talk to yourself. Like, would you ever say something mean, like what some of the things that you just said in that like awesome like awareness moment that you were having? Like, can you imagine saying that to someone else?
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's the other thing though too, is like how you said, if we all could think like how you are how you're trying to teach us to think, if we could all just, perfect this skill and all be nice to ourselves and all not struggle with any self-confidence or whatever, then the world would be a better place. And it's funny, that also ties into something I learned the other day. Not really learned, but it was more of like I heard it and I was like, oh wow, like that's so true. Like, the more I think about it, that's so true. That what we criticize sometimes in others, like what like kind of bothers us or like gets us, like, you have ever like seen someone and like you just get so irritated by like something, so like that's actually something that you don't like about in yourself. And I pondered on that for a second. I heard that the other day and I like really sat back and thought about it, and I was like, or it's something you feel you're lacking in yourself. Like, so say like there's someone who's just like really outgoing. They they can like public speak, they have a great personality, and you're like, oh, they're so cringe. And but really like internally in you, it's like, I wish I could public speak like that. I'm incapable of doing that because I'm so anxious. And you wish you could be like that. It's like almost like, it's kind of like how people bully. Like you're hurting inside because of something, so you bully someone else. So it's really true. I think if we did all have kindness to ourselves, the world would be a better place.
I agree. I think also that takes you back to that feelings list that we were talking about earlier. If you're checking in with yourself about your feelings, you might be like, ooh, that might be jealousy or envy instead of anger or frustration.
I think it's easier to just make fun and pick on someone and like laugh with a group of people. For a lot of people, it's easier to do that. And I think a lot of kids do that too. Like, think about it. Kids will get made fun of, and the things they're getting made fun of for, it's probably that kid being insecure or wishing they could be like that. You know, like the kid who like puts himself out there and is like, will go on social media and like create a video and they're like, oh, look at this kid trying to sing on social media. Like, how cringe is that? And it's like, you wish you were that confident to go do that. You know, you're sitting back with the kids laughing at this kid, but part of you wishes you could put yourself out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense for sure. So I have like a couple more questions I want to get to before we stop. Because I I am of course thinking of myself, but also with my clients. I'm curious what you would say about the obstacles that people face when really trying to heal their inner critic, and how can they sort of overcome any obstacles that come in the way? Like, what advice would you have?
Well, I think, going with this, like, step one, I really like steps.
Yes, same.
If we go with like step one, noticing the negative thought, step two is trying to do it in a non-judgmental way. And that would probably pivot into step three, is noticing what your blocks are. Like, what is hard about trying to change the thinking patterns, which would probably be step four. And so noticing, your resistance to changing, as we're talking about habits. Like, this is a habit that's really hardwired into your brain, and it's so much easier just to keep having the same negative self-talk. And it's so much easier to stay the same even when it's uncomfortable than it is to change, because it's hard to change. And obviously, as therapists and podcasters and humans, we believe in that people can change, but it does take work. And sometimes the biggest obstacle is, I don't really want to do the work. It's hard. I don't have to call myself out every time I have a negative thought. I'd rather just have the negative thought. So it's really being willing to step up and say, I want to make the change. I don't like the way this feels. So I think that's the biggest obstacle, is dedicating yourself to creating neutral or positive thinking patterns.
And even that too, that the work that goes into it,
Yeah.
it's almost, then you have to learn how to be compassionate with yourself and patient with yourself if you're not seeing maybe the results or expectations you had in your mind, right? So that even includes self-compassion as doing the work, like that piece of it.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what Taylor was saying. Like, you don't wake up one day and say, like, oh, I'm anxiety free. Like, this is amazing. I did this like one thing and now I'm good to go. Right. I truly think anxiety is something we manage throughout the rest of our lives, but
Same.
it brings that self-awareness piece into it. Oh, I'm noticing my anxiety is a little higher. I'm not a 4 anymore. I'm a 2, but it has to start with that self-awareness, and then that kindness. Okay, maybe I'm a 2 today and that sucks, but I'm aware of it and I can do something about it. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not.
Well, and like I said before, so many people have different experiences throughout their life. So, someone's, the work that someone is doing is also going to look so different. There really is no timeline, right? You're kind of just working on this piece, this inner peace throughout your life, because life throws adversity at you, right? And so, there could be certain trauma that people experience, and that makes it more difficult to access that part of your brain that is rational and more logical because there's a lot of work you have to do in processing through trauma, right? So have you seen that at all?
You know, I haven't really necessarily like honed in on that on personally for my clients, but I have certainly seen that in my own life.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually, because I do a lot of telehealth, I don't necessarily go into, depending on the trauma that people experience, oftentimes I will refer out for significant traumas to someone in person, because I think that there is a little bit of a limitations, at least in my practice with telehealth. And so, you know, sometimes we really try to focus on what's happening now, learn from our past, obviously, but then, you know, connecting the dots is an important piece of it, but then really moving forward into what can we do now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think naming that inner critic and noticing you're having the thoughts is also like just a key part of it. And then figuring out, if there's a trauma, certainly diving into that, depending on how the client wants to handle that.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone is like at the beginning of their journey with their self-compassion and what do you think? You mentioned like awareness. Do you think like the journaling would be the best way to do that? You had mentioned the journaling. And I guess with confidence too. So I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the confidence, because I'm thinking about, I know you mentioned like journaling is great for, and I agree. I think being able to really tap into the thoughts you're having is huge from the beginning. But like with the confidence piece too, would you say that's the would be a good first step for someone that's wants to learn about that?
Wait, what is, sorry.
So
Like,
that's okay. So like, would you say the first step to someone beginning their journey of working on self-compassion or confidence, would that be kind of the same type of awareness you're saying?
yeah, well, because I think that what gets in the way of the confidence is the negative self-talk. And that is
Oh, okay.
the self-doubt. So if we can like really work on harnessing those negative thinking patterns, then we can start taking the actions that the negative thinking patterns are holding us back from. And that's when we can start to really become a confident person, by doing the hard things. But it starts with that compassion, and also like every time we have a negative thinking pattern, like I can't do this, like I'm not going on this podcast, or I'm not, you know, showing up to the bar class, or, you know, whatever examples we talk about, right, is pushing through that uncomfortable negative thought process that we're probably having, and then saying, wait a second, is this real, is this really the self-talk that I want to have? Can I put this away for a second, or can I work on cognitive strategies that help with it? And so, you know, naming that, knowing that you're doing something negative, naming it, being kind to yourself will help you to push out of your comfort zone, which is what we have to do to increase our confidence.
Yeah. And I know that we mentioned it a little bit earlier. Taylor did, but I do want to say that there is power in affirmations and in, you know, mirror work. It is something I've done on my own, and it has been life-changing for me. So I think when Taylor, you were explaining it's probably the way a lot of people hear certain buzzwords, right? Oh gosh, is that what it means? And it can feel very woo-woo, or, you know, but there is actually method, and there's research behind the way that affirmations work to help the brain and really change the brain. And mirror work is also huge as far as my journey and a lot of my clients in really just knowing how to speak to yourself in a way that you really hear it. And that's looking at yourself and really trying to make that a practice of talking that way. And sometimes those statements don't come as easily to one person or the other. So sometimes it might require, you know, writing some of those statements down, putting them up visually where you can see them, and then intentionally saying them out loud to yourself, not just like a robot, right? And so there is a method to it, which I talk a lot about in the Anxiety Healer's Guide. There's a whole chapter on how to do affirmations effectively and how it really changes the brain. But I'm curious about your view on affirmations.
I love affirmations.
Oh,
I do.
good.
That's how I started my Instagram page, by just writing affirmations down, and people were like, just starting to like everything. And I'm like, oh wow, this, people need to hear this. And then they need to know that there's science behind affirmations. And I call them, I like mantras. I don't know. I do a lot of yoga. So I always call them mantras, affirmations, but we can interchange them. But I think that would be the next step, is after noticing the negative self-talk, and then saying, I want to do this in a kind way, it would be then swapping out a negative thought with either something neutral, which would be an affirmation like, I'm doing the best I can, or something positive like, wow, actually, I did a really great job last time I tried to do this, and really picking yourself up. But yeah, I really truly believe in the power of affirmations and mantras. And, that really is the next step in everything that we're talking about too, is noticing the negative self-talk, but then replacing it, because it doesn't help to just notice it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Mel
go
Robbins.
ahead.
You guys like Mel Robbins? I love her.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she has a book called The High Five Habit, and it's about, instead of like, if people aren't comfortable with affirmations, it's like literally looking yourself in the mirror and high-fiving yourself. And sometimes my clients prefer that method. They're like, well, that seems easier to do than like tell myself I'm a beautiful person, because again, it has to be believable. So if someone's not there where they're going to say something great about themselves, then, something like a high five, or like hands over the heart, where you're, saying, I acknowledge myself as a person, I'm doing the best I can be really helpful as well.
Yeah. It's really hard to do that work like on your own, to be honest. So if there's a coach or a therapist or anyone that really specializes, maybe Meredith, in affirmation work, it's really powerful being able to have someone guide you through those exercises.
I bring up affirmations and mantras with like almost all of my clients, and some people are like, what are you talking about? And other people are like, wow, that actually, once I try it, feels really good. And it's and it works, right? So so I think it's great. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, this has been so amazing. At the end of every episode, we do something called the Healing Tip of the Week. And I would love for you to, I don't know, share something with our listeners and viewers that maybe you would recommend as far as something they could take away from this, maybe an action step or something they could practice or work on for this week. And whatever you think would be best. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it just ties back into what we've been talking about all along, which hopefully, like, the biggest takeaway would be just having that like awareness, noticing if you're beating yourself up, if that inner critic is really loud, and then trying to be kinder to yourself about it, bring in that self-compassion, and then replace it with something that's realistic, neutral, or even positive, like an affirmation. And yes, that does take time, but just takes time doing it over and over and over again. So I always recommend putting like reminders on your iPhone, so that like a few times per day, you're just checking in with yourself. How am I doing? And then you can even start trying this process is, oh, I'm noticed that I'm being hard on myself. Okay, let's work with that. And over time really does work. And I mean, you both probably know that too, is that it just takes time and effort, and just replacing negative thoughts it's really, really powerful. And I know, because I've done it myself, and it sounds like you women have also done the work. And it's not like some like woo woo thing. Like it actually works, and it's science backed. And just try it and just see what happens.
Yeah. I love that. Putting notifications on your phone. I actually do that. And sometimes I recommend for people that want to practice different type of breath work to also put on their phone, like to breathe, and just any of those alerts can be really helpful in reminding your brain to think about that right? And be intentional with it. I also think there's one thing that I do and I encourage everyone to do, which I was talking about on the live earlier, which is to, at the end of the day, think of 3 things you're proud of yourself for that day.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, if it's a journal or whatever it is, but before you go to bed, just think of 3 things you're proud of for yourself. And just get into the habit of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And you could even say, I'm proud of myself for starting to shift my negative thinking patterns.
Yeah.
Like that could be one
100%.
Embrace. Yeah. 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 I do the gratitude practice before bed, and I love that. That's changed my life too.
That's awesome.
So, well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you both.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where can everyone find you?
So my Instagram is my passion. It's so fun. So it's my name, Meredith, and then there's a dot in the middle because my other one is long story. It's Meredith.Van Ness. And then you could also look on my website. If you just Google Meredith Van Ness, it'll come up. It's meredithvanness.com. And probably the course on my website that would relate most to this topic would be my course. It's called Empower You. And it's about, owning who you are, being authentic in that, replacing that negative self-talk, and then showing up as you actually want to show up in your life. So, yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Define me.
Awesome. And we will put it all in our show notes too. So for anyone listening, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you both. And happy holidays.
Yes. Happy holidays.
Happy
Enjoy
holidays.
it. This is a perfect episode for right before that.
Right.
Okay. We will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Should I hang up?